This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 595. Don't do it. Monday, June 1st, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. As one report expressed, the president's attack on Twitter and the rest of social media this past week was years in the making. And whichever side you land on in this battle, the implications for users and marketers could be dramatic. So tonight we'll discuss. Also, whether Spotify is killing or helping podcasting, the hidden potential for luxury marketers, Animal Crossing as a political platform, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the former acting CMO at Time Warner Cable and the current academic director of the Integrated Marketing and Communications program at NYU's School of Professional Studies. Mr. Michael Diamond is here. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Bob. Pleasure to be with you.
Now, also with us, we welcome back the Consumer Engagement Lead and Head of Shopper Marketing for the J.M. Smucker Company, Ms. Liz Mayer. Liz, you're back.
Thanks for having me, Bob. How are you?
I'm well. And finally, we have the Vice President of Product and Digital Marketing at Protegrity, as well as founder of research consultancy Quantent Marketing, Ms. Tamara Gaffney. Tamara, hi, how are you?
Bob, you are hitting us up on a very, very big day. Good to be here.
Big day. Yes, it is a very big day. This whole weekend's been big. This whole week has been big, and it started out with a really crazy story. Not just what was going on in Minneapolis, which is also kind of keeping us all watching the news feeds, but the week started off in a weird way. Twitter finally did what many people had been urging them to do. They followed their own guidelines, and they labeled one of the president's tweets for glorifying violence. And then, as well, they placed notices on subsequent tweets warning of erroneous facts, basically challenging the veracity of some of the things that he was saying. Now, the move evoked outrage by the president, resulting in an executive order that curtails Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which, for those of you not familiar with U.S. law, the part of the law that social media companies have used to claim no liability for user-posted content. Michael, setting aside the irony of this move that would basically make it essential for the platform to police and take down most of Trump's tweets to begin with, I don't really understand what's going on here. Maybe I'm misunderstanding things. What are the potential implications to all social media with this move and the battle that's going on between the president and the social media companies?
Well, I think that, we can all acknowledge the rhetoric of public discourse has become pretty fractious and at times dangerous over time, and many people would like to see that whole environment cleaned up. But at the same time, as we know, Section 230 has really helped an industry, an important, powerful industry grow. Important for us as advertisers and marketers, but also for individuals and communities and causes. So it's obviously not an uncomplicated issue. I think that the simple answer is that cleaner, more trustworthy, accurate environments and platforms are generally better for advertisers. There's some evidence to suggest that consumers sort of take their cues from the environment in which the advertising is seen. And so if the platforms become more trustworthy and are seen to be trying to present solid information and not misrepresent information, then I think that's a good experience, a good environment for advertisers.
Explain to me one thing though. There's something about the news coverage of this move by the Trump administration that kind of is confusing to me, because the news coverage of it seems to imply that this is a bad thing, that he went after Section 230. But in essence, what it does is it makes the social media platforms accountable, which is what everybody's been screaming about and wanting the social media platforms to be accountable for the content that's on there. So I'm not sure which side of the fence we should be on. I mean, it sounds good to have a safer environment for advertisers to exist in. But at the same time, doesn't this limit free speech, and which has been the big claim by Twitter all along?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And if you remember, I think it was back in 2017, there was a whole bunch of people going after the president for, deplatforming certain people that disagreed with him on Twitter. He was blocking people on Twitter, and everyone was up in arms about the fact that he was blocking people that didn't agree with him. So, I think Twitter has a right to disagree or be critical of or respond to people on its platforms, especially if they break the various community norms. And, I think that on that, we probably all can agree that some of the comments, and it's clearly not limited to just one politician, but some of the comments on those platforms break many community norms and have created a place which is just driving more and more divisiveness. So I think wherever you come out on the issue of freedom of speech, and it's clearly not just a freedom of speech issue. Indeed, it may not even be a First Amendment issue. I'm no scholar in that area, but because it's a private company. But wherever you come out, I think the idea that the platform would take some responsibility for cleaning up its act is a very important move.
It feels to me like these are two separate issues going on, Liz, at the same time. You've got on one side Twitter finally living up to their own user standards. They have a guide for behavior on the platform, and they're finally living up to it at least a little bit. And meanwhile, the president is going after the company based on a law that doesn't really help him. So, it's almost like they're having an argument back and forth. So let's just concentrate on whether or not any of this makes the platform safer for advertisers. And you as a brand marketer, it's just like,
right.
Does any of this make the platform safer for you as an advertiser to get involved with it?
I think the way I think about social media in general is that it's ripe for misinformation, and there's inherent risk, as you said, in the platform. It's all about the level of risk an advertiser is going to take based on the soul of the brand. And I think based on that brand, you're never going to have, a situation where all risk is mitigated. I think what's most important is to really understand for brand marketers, what is the role of that medium? How are they adding value to their consumers? And then what is the context for which these communications are occurring? Because I think to the original point, Michael made, these social networks are about community. And it's really challenging to manage that community and control that community because with high controls, you lose the community. So it's a tough one.
Well, Tamara, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, because this is affecting all sectors of the advertising and marketing community. And I'm wondering, what are you seeing from this? Is this going to help or hurt marketers, advertisers in the long run?
I go back to thinking about the irony of our communication about our national, agenda coming in 280 character bytes. Twitter just doesn't seem to me like a great place to be having long form communications. And it's meant for really just conveying very, very short bursts of information. And it can be mistaken because it's so short. Who knows? I mean, I actually I'm much more of I'm a libertarian. So I very much believe in not having a lot of regulation and letting markets regulate themselves. But I think as consumers and as viewers of any form of social media or any media in general, we all need to take a certain responsibility as well to determine what we feel comfortable with. So that's kind of where I'll leave it, as more self-policing of what I want to look at. I don't actually look at those tweets.
I mean, that's the that's the trouble with all social media platforms. I mean, on one side, they want to have this free speech opportunity. They view that the platform itself is a bastion of free speech, that they shouldn't be editing, that they shouldn't be suppressing thoughts and opinions. On the other side, it's a private company, so it's not really protecting free speech. It's not like it's a public venue. It's kind of something that is being owned and operated by an individual company. So, I mean, I don't think that we're ever going to solve the problem of that dichotomy. I think the biggest issue is, how do we make it safe for brands, for, in our context, the things that we're talking about here. How do we make it safe for brands? And I don't know that it ever can be truly safe for brands. I think Liz put it best. There's inherent risk in this platform. And
there's inherent risk in other platforms as well, as we're going to talk about later. Brands have risks all over in digital. So I think that it's really incumbent upon the brands to figure out what they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, but I think you can't miss the point that, these are very different platforms and media than we've ever experienced, and perhaps our capacity to choose what we do and don't see is much more curtailed, even sort of subconsciously, beyond our awareness. And that's where I think some of the concerns would be for brands as well. Is what else are consumers being exposed to in and around their brands? What sort of tribes are you ending up in, etc. And what role do you play? And I think we'll talk about this more generally, I think, later, about the importance of brands taking a position on various important social and political issues these days. And I think this is part of that. Part of what position you take will be thinking about what company you keep, and so that's very critical, and it's more algorithmically decided for you in the social media platforms than it would have been on traditional media, I guess.
Let me take a quick poll of the room about Section 230 in particular. Section 230, if it was somehow restricted or taken away or mitigated, whatever the executive order does to it, do we agree that it makes social media a safer place for brands for something like this to happen? Even if it kills the platform, even if it's bad for society and free speech, is it better for brands? And is that enough for us? Any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I don't think so. It's just a guess, but to me, it's going to be another place where we have to figure out how to regulate a marketplace that is extremely it changes all the time. So how would we even really figure out what to do? Maybe we should be making social media regulated the same way as a television station is, but we'd have to figure out how, and that's where my concern is.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Tamara 100% that it's probably impractical to police something like this, and we'll have to find other ways to encourage these companies to really work on it. And I one had a sense maybe 6 months ago or so that we were moving in the right direction, and perhaps Twitter's actions are also moving in the right direction of taking more control. But the idea of the practical implications of how Twitter or Facebook or any of these social media platforms would have to extensively monitor and manage in order to not fall foul of once they lose the Section 230 protection. I just don't know how that would happen. And in the long term, I think clearly these are important platforms for brands and for communities, as we've all said. And so one wouldn't want to see them die and disappear.
Well, I think
I agree.
Do you agree, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Tamara and Michael, their points are well made. I think just it's what is the sustainability, and even how are these infrastructures going to enable what their true purpose is, which is community and connection through regulation. And so the risk premiums just seem so high and frankly unsustainable. So I agree.
Yeah, I can totally see what everybody's saying. I don't know that I necessarily agree wholeheartedly with this. I mean, I think that the social media companies have continually pushed back on the monitoring of their own platforms, saying that it was impossible to do. Yet I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. When you can put together some of the tools that they've put in place to get information from us and to use that information and put it into action, you'd think that they'd be able to do something to police the system a little bit better. Even in the case of the Trump tweet, that was the Trump tweets that were given some kind of tag on them, there were still blatant lies that were left untagged as of the beginning of the weekend. So I'm not really sure even they're being consistent about it, and I'm not sure whether or not that's making it a point or not. But it seems like they could do better, even when they're trying to do the right thing. They could do better, and they're just not. So forcing them to do it.
They could do better, but I also think there's a very high bar, Bob, to engage in that kind of curating of conversations or, words of elected officials. I would imagine it's a very tough situation, to sit in that executive suite, because that's quite a high bar to enter into, appear like you're putting your finger on one side of the balance and not the other. And that's exactly what they're accused of, So, I'm sure they could always be doing more or doing better, but I don't envy them the task of trying to thread that needle, especially and even more so when things have become so fractious. Perhaps actions they take actually cause the discourse to become even worse and more incendiary, and then they'll get blamed for that as well. So it's clearly a very challenging process to figure out the right path here.
Makes me glad I'm not a part of Twitter, I'll tell you. Makes me not on the board or having to deal with these decisions. I'm obviously on Twitter. Well, I want to move on, and I want to talk about another company that's doing a lot to either help us or hurt us. Spotify is doing a lot of work right now in the podcasting space. Some people are happy about it. Some people are not. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, and give you or someone you know another chance to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for checking them out. Now, you know this. Behind your brand, behind every brand out there, there are real people just like you or your coworkers or employees making decisions. And if you're all making those decisions right now, you know how stressful it can be. You're talking to consumers who are stressed. You're stressed. Everybody's stressed. Say one wrong thing and it's like a firestorm. You can unleash social media content that's coming out back at you and totally slamming your brand, slamming you. It can cause all kinds of problems. This is where our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, can help you. Now, Methodify collects real feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it out to the world. And the whole process will take you hours. I said that right, hours, not days. Now, Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions that will protect their brand and themselves. Now, you know about this. A few weekends ago, I guess a few months ago now, Methodify was used to test digital creative for a fast food chain to make sure the messaging wasn't tone deaf. Now, the insights they got out of that was invaluable information for them. It helped them to avoid costly mistakes in the process and come out with a much more effective strategy into market. Methodify can do the same for you. Actual feedback from customers is a game changer because right now brands that wait and see are going to wind up making those costly mistakes and paying the price later. Connect with your customers. We want you to do that. We want you to build relationships. We want you to build trust. We want you to build fans, but we want you to also do it smartly. So test everything, and Methodify can get you started today. Now, to find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast. That's methodify.it/BeanCast. And as a way of saying thank you, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. So this is totally worth it. And don't just keep this to yourself. If you know someone out in the business world who's doing something in this space, someone who's maybe has a job similar to you in another company, maybe someone doing something complementary to what you're doing, go tell them about this. Let them know about Methodify and what they can do for your brand. Methodify.it/BeanCast, again, is that URL, and we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, in the wake of Joe Rogan, if you don't know who Joe Rogan is, you're not a true podcaster, podcast listener. Not saying I listen to him or anything, or I'm being a big Joe Rogan fan, but we've all heard of him. Joe Rogan is signing an exclusive deal with Spotify. And many have publicly worried that Spotify is doing to podcasting what Google and Facebook did to blogging, which is causing some consternation among the people who watch this podcasting space. So, Liz, let me ask you, is this a legitimate concern? Are you more interested in a corporate-run podcasting network as an advertiser, as a brand marketer? Are you more interested in having that structure of a company, network, owning a whole bunch of podcasts and having that kind of establishment to work with? Or are you more interested in preserving independent podcasting as an opportunity to go through the influencer networking and use it that way? And is one killing the other? Are we seeing, or what we're seeing is the corporate side killing the independent side? I know that's a lot to ask, but I wanted to frame this as widely as I could before I asked the question.
It's a meaty question. I mean, the reality is the future of streaming audio is podcasting. So, I view this as an evolution of a medium that has been largely, democratized and open. Spotify is going to grow their business so long as they grow the entire category, or so long as they get enough, users that are exclusive, to their content. But to your point, from an advertiser's perspective, currently, this is just such a broad open market, and attribution is really challenging, as targeting is as well. And so this move could provide better attribution and targeting to marketers who need to prove their ROI. I think the part on, the effect of the future of the independent podcasting, that's a tough one. I think currently, as long as the podcasting medium remains open and democratized, it's enabling multiple revenue streams, to podcasters like Rogan prior to him signing this exclusivity. And with that reach, as long as it's quality reach for these podcasters, they're getting profits. But I think, at the end of the day, how are consumers going to buy into this? How are these audiences going to grow? If consumers are receiving value from this exclusivity, and they're getting curated, seamless experiences, and there's better ad performance for the advertisers, this could increase barriers to entry for the independents. But I think the thing that continues to be top of mind for me, because podcasting is evolving and it's gaining in popularity with consumers, is what is the consumer experience that's desired, and how is Spotify making a connected experience, given their previous acquisitions with Gimlet and Ringer? Are there barriers of entry? Not really, not for the consumers. But do they want to handle over their personal data? They might not. So I think those are the things that are still on my mind.
I've got some thoughts, but I'm going to leave it to the rest of the panel to kind of weigh in before I go at it, because it's just like, obviously, I'll hold off. Let me get Tamara on this. What do you think about this scenario going on right now with Spotify trying to put a gate around the best content that they can possibly collect into one place and make it only exclusively through their platform? I'm assuming it's part of the whole drive to get subscriptions into this mix. It obviously adds a lot more metrics because they know everything about their listeners. It's not like a podcasting experience where you're out there just kind of dealing with server metrics, of files hit and things like that. I mean, you've got actual data on people streaming. It sounds like if this is the future for podcasting as a whole is going to go away and streaming audio is going to take its place.
Wow. I can tell that there's pent up passion to, your opinion, because actually this is really a question for you, Bob. I mean, you're the one who's been running a successful podcast for a really long time. And I'm the first to admit that podcasting has wonky metrics. I mean, I've had advertisers for a number of years on my program, and I tell them honestly, anybody who tells you that they have statistics or actual numbers on downloads and audience is lying to you, because there is no metric for podcasting. There's no way to get to that number. It's because your file could be hit 1,000 times by somebody trying to download it one time. You have no idea what the actual customer size or audience size is. You have some tools that are doing some best guesses. You have the IAB with some specific guidance in this area, but none of it really gets to a number like Spotify's delivering. So in a lot of ways, I think what Spotify's doing is great. I'm just wondering, is it good for advertisers to have it all locked up in big networks as opposed to dealing with small influencers like the current model represents? Well, when Howard Stern went into a paid channel and wasn't on broadcast anymore, people followed him, right? And maybe not as many people followed him, but if you're in that position, if you're Joe, you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be a good move for my listeners, and the ones who really want to follow me will follow me. And they will subscribe to Spotify if they're not currently Spotify users. And he's probably right, because it does seem like his audience is really that engaged. And that's fantastic for Spotify, but it's also legitimizes podcasting to a certain degree, I think. I don't think that it takes away the independent podcaster just because Spotify made a deal. I think that water will find a way, right? It flows through the cracks and crevices. And what we're looking at with podcasting, I think, is the authenticity, the genuine messages, and the diversity of messages, and really large form media, which I actually hesitate to say that Spotify is there, but maybe they are, right? They are legitimizing how important podcasting is. So perhaps it will help bring new audience to podcasting. And as someone who is more of a listener to podcasts, I find the whole podcasting marketplaces of how to discover content confusing and difficult. And I would like to have a simpler method, something where the content discovery is a lot easier. So yes, that does potentially limit some of the creativity, but I don't think it has to.
I would
go ahead.
I definitely tend to agree with Tamara on this. I think it's great for Spotify's business model, and it's a smart move. And we've seen it many times with media platforms. I was in the UK when Sky launched, Be Sky Be as it was, and built up all its content with, exclusive contents. But the marketplace remained vibrant, and different platforms and channels for content expanded, and I think you'll continue to see that. The other thing is a number of podcasts, and I think maybe this is where Tamara was going. The number of podcasts funded by quite large international media organizations or large, well-endowed foundations, etc. I think there's an enormous opportunity still for a very vibrant independent podcast movement, even if Spotify and others perhaps follow in locking up some exclusive content. I feel this is such a nascent market still that it'd be hard to call the outcome of this particular strategic move.
You know, that idea of raising all boats, which is essentially what you guys are both saying, this idea that if Spotify does this and does this well, that it'll have a net effect of raising awareness and audience for podcasting, is an interesting concept. Liz, can it exist in both places as the audience grows? Because we're still only at about 25% of the U.S. audience. I don't know what it is worldwide, but only about 25% of the U.S. audience tunes into podcasts on a regular basis. As that audience grows, will it trickle down to the influencer audiences and the independent podcasters? And does that still hold value to you as a brand advertiser to work with these smaller brands and smaller podcast networks, if you will, as opposed to just putting all your money in the easy play, which is the big guys, you know, the big networks like Spotify or NPR or one of those?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think it ultimately depends on the brand, and it depends on the content, you know, of the podcast themselves. You know, again, it's about the contextual relevancy, and it's about those audiences and whether those audiences are exclusive, you know, to Spotify, or whether you can reach them, you know, through different, you know, independent networks. It's really ultimately up to the brand. I do think, though, you know, that the metrics piece of the equation is going to continue to be important as marketing budgets, you know, are scrutinized. And I think that's why, you know, so long as there is value, you know, via even just the contextual relevancy piece, then I think it's still a huge opportunity, because I do agree, you know, with the comments made that podcasting it is still growing. I don't believe it's saturated.
And that's an important point to make right there at the end. I mean, the fact that it is a growing medium, so there's still room for many other permutations and many other opportunities to evolve out of it. Quite frankly, as much as people might think that I'm really against the Joe Rogan deal or against Spotify, I'm actually very interested in it. I think that it's the right move for this company to make, and I think that it's the right move for advertisers. I mean, I'm the first to admit, I've said it already, you know, the metrics of independent podcasting are not nearly as strong as the metrics of these big conglomerates, these networks that put the content through one channel that is highly measured and highly regulated by that broadcaster or by that network. And it makes a lot of sense for advertisers. It makes sense for the future of the medium. But just because, you know, that's going on, it doesn't mean that there's still not room for the smaller players. I mean, even though Facebook and Google arguably killed the blog still exists. You still have people blogging out there. And there's still lots of people doing it quite well, and some of them are making money at it. So I think what it does is it just makes the best rise to the top, and it helps to cull out a lot of the noise that's going on in the place right now. Well, I want to move on. I want to talk next about luxury marketers. Some research out this past week seems to suggest that millennials, especially of all audiences, while being cautious with everyday retail, are still eager to shop and buy luxury items, and that luxury purveyors are missing a huge opportunity here by not advertising. Now, Tamara, you know my theory about studies. We always take them with a grain of salt. And am I wrong, or does this smack of being self-serving research by an agency or publisher?
I was about to say, talking about train wrecks of data, let's examine this particular study, which actually, full disclosure, has been produced by the team that I actually used to manage and work with. So I know them very well.
Oh, okay.
However, And I don't know, and I'm not going to say for sure because I actually looked up to see if I could find the study anywhere. What's the methodology? How many people, etc. Not posted, not linked to from the article, and not available as far as I can tell, other than a report from Bain and Company, which was a different report. So having put all those disclaimers in, I will say that the title is extremely misleading to the actual data. So what it says is luxury marketers might be missing out because Gen Z wants to see their ads. But then when you go down to the very end of the article and it talks about, well, why would Gen Z, who isn't really as wealthy as the target audience that these luxury marketers would really need, why would they actually want to see the ads from luxury retailers? And the suggestion is that it's because they moved in with their parents when they lost their jobs recently, and therefore they want to see luxury ads because they're dreaming. And that wouldn't be a really good reason for a marketer to go and spend more money. So I think it's one of those things that's almost kind of a clickbaity title. And the reality of what the study says is a lot more circumspect, shall we say.
Well, that gives us a firm feet on the ground approach to the data that we're looking at then. I mean, it's just like, it's not really saying that there's an opportunity for luxury marketers, but let's talk pragmatically though in this time. I mean, it's just like, there are certain people who are working at home, who are doing fine, who are still having a disposable income, who still have the opportunity and the desire for luxury goods. Is there any case to be made that this does have a grain of truth in it, that luxury marketers are squandering an opportunity to get a captive audience in love with their brand as they come out of that quarantine, and they might become an even better customer for them if they're being advertised to right now? Is there any logical way that you can see that being the case in this circumstance?
I mean, absolutely. And I'll just give a couple of personal anecdotes from this weekend, actually. I went into a store to go buy a hot tub, a jacuzzi type spa, and they are all sold out at the $15,000, $16,000 range in my local market. Wow. They are gone. And these are expensive. And I've also tried to reach out to landscape contractors, and they're telling me September. So, what's happening is that some of us do still have some money that we'd like to spend. We just aren't spending it the way that we used to. I used to spend a lot more money on luxury travel, and I'm not going to this year. So I'm thinking about, doing some things to my yard to make my home more of a luxurious place to be. So I definitely think there's a change in buying patterns, but not necessarily to go away from luxury things completely. It's more a matter of what's going to make you happy in the circumstances that we're in. And I think that if you're a marketer and you see that you're starting to move in terms of market share, well, then you've got two things going for you. One of them is you should probably advertise now to make sure you're getting the deal, right? Because there's a lot of different, for example, hot tub manufacturers. Which one's going to get my brand awareness? And then secondly, make sure that as people try out these new retailers, that they maintain some loyalty. And that's where customer experience comes in.
Michael, I'd love to hear you weigh in on this because, I'm listening to what Tamara is saying, and it makes a lot of sense. There continues to be a desire for luxury goods. It's just different than it was prior to the quarantine, and that certain markets that are being troubled by like travel and leisure and those types of things, that's causing a lot of consternation in those sectors. That money's got to go somewhere, and it behooves luxury marketers to figure out where they fit into that movement, doesn't it?
I think that's a great summary. I mean, obviously some forms of luxury expenditure like travel and, some forms of entertainment, in-person VIP types of luxury experiences, which were becoming popular pre-COVID, will take a little bit of a longer time to sort of come back. But that money will want to go somewhere. There's this lovely idea, actually comes out of China, and this is the market to look at, I think, which is this term they call revenge spending, or sometimes called retaliatory consumption. And what you find is that people coming out of, emerging from these kind of lockdowns, or the term actually came out of the cultural crisis when people, cultural revolution, when people emerged from that in China, they wanted to spend their money, they wanted to spoil themselves. And you're actually seeing this from what I've read, starting to pick up in the Chinese luxury market. And we know that was, a market that was driving luxury spending globally. So now in China, it's not going to be as much people traveling around the world and spending their money in Paris and Rome and London and New York. It will be more home based, but you're going to start to see that spending pick up again. And I mean, luxury fashion has probably some more near-term problems to do with inventory and unsold inventory and just sort of figuring out what they do with the existing inventory. But and they're going to have to be very careful not to discount too heavily or do anything that would risk, the sort of premium value of the brand. But longer term, I think that, all the trends we saw, the shifts in global wealth, the idea of brands like Balenciaga, who are doing these dad sneakers and all these incredible sort of luxury manifestations and partnerships. I think you'll continue to see that. And I think people will want to spoil themselves. So if I were a marketer in that space, I would, as Tamara said, I would be pretty active in trying to make sure, I had, was mentally present and physically present.
One of the things I find most funny about this article, besides the fact that, what Tamara said and what I kind of assumed right from the beginning was that it's a bunch of horse hockey. But this idea that that luxury marketers are somehow missing an opportunity, Liz. For me, I'm looking at it going, luxury marketers have always missed opportunities. Luxury marketers are usually the worst at doing this correctly. They don't do anything more than show beauty shots of their product and say, you can be like this. It's not smart marketing as much as it is just doing the same thing, the same tactics over and over and over again. Is it any surprise that they're missing this opportunity now, given that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think when you think about the luxury, industry and these brands overall, it's about inaccessibility to an extent, and it's about aspiration, and that is they make themselves scarce because that is what luxury means. And so I don't know that it would be smart for them to necessarily denigrate, not to say that they'd be denigrating the brand by considering, a younger audience necessarily. I think the luxury brands need to understand who is the buyer and who is the user, right? Because if there is an interest from, younger consumers, they might not have the household income to purchase these, but their parents might, and their parents might have a disposable income in the short term. And maybe there's some presence there. So I think that's what we have to think about is this advertising is a long-term play for these brands. It's a long-term play for all brands, period. But for these brands in particular, it's about strengthening the scarcity apparent with luxury, and it is making it aspirational for these buyers. So yeah, I thought this was very interesting, and I agree with Tamara in terms of the clickbait nature of the article headline in and of itself.
Yeah, and one more thing about this, the notion of escapism, which a lot of those ads really are about escapism or about being something other than your current life. And maybe there is something to that there is a desire to see something other than my current life right now, maybe more so than at other times. It doesn't mean that you're going to become a buyer, but then again, maybe you would if you later on and kind of came to that. And I was laughing on mute while you were kind of chastising luxury marketing, Bob. I think they know what they're doing for their marketplaces. And if it feels like they're going to be able to capitalize on this desire to escape our current situations in our minds with advertising, that they'll be looking at that.
Well,
I would tend to sort of come in on the side of luxury marketing actually as well, Bob. I think they've been quite thoughtful in some of their experimentation and adoption of VR and AR and all sorts of other things going on, certainly on the fashion side of things, and the democratization more generally of global wealth. It's shifted. It's not the old model anymore, and I think they've been quite sophisticated at sort of identifying new audiences, new consumers, or new ways in which to attach that aspirational element to products and services that perhaps weren't considered luxurious in the past. So they've continued to redefine it, I think, pretty well, and it's playing to a very human instinct, arguably one which has been accelerated or amplified by having been shut down for several months. So.
Well, this will be interesting to watch. But one more thing that's interesting to watch, there's a little game out there called Animal Crossing. And AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is showing up in people's town wearing campaign wear. Hong Kong protesters are staging demonstrations in town squares, all with talking animals to boot. Animal Crossing may be the fastest-selling game ever on the Nintendo Switch, but it's also fast becoming a platform for political communication and outreach. Let me throw this out to the group. Obviously, a lot of these issues are serious. I mean, the stuff going on in Hong Kong is deadly serious. Black Lives Matter and the protests going on after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, that's a serious subject. Yet people are mobilizing via this silly game of talking animals and having real meetings and real campaign conversations and real movements springing up from these interactions and real marketing going on in the platforms. I'll start with Tamara. Tamara, what do you think about this? I mean, it's a silly game that's basically made for kids that adults have adopted during this quarantine as a way to escape into this island paradise. Yet people are using it to mobilize. Is it a sign of the future? What does this say about the future of political campaigning and political fundraising and political advertising?
Wow. Well, I'm not going to actually even suppose what it says about the future of campaigning, but it reminds me of Flat Stanley. It reminds me of Elf on a Shelf. It feels like there are times in our lives where we need something to rally around. And if it's Animal Crossing and it puts a smile on our face or makes us feel connected somehow, I'm good with it. I don't know if you noticed, but during the SpaceX launch, which, we should be talking about SpaceX. Like, this is super exciting. And it feels like it got totally overshadowed right now. But did you see the little shiny dinosaur float by? I was like, wait, what was that? It just gave me that moment of curiosity and a moment of just kind of stopping my normal, like, flowing over my eyeballs. Everything right now is just kind of passing by me unless I can see something that I can relate to. And I think that's what this is about.
I'm thinking more broadly, though. I mean, Animal Crossing in and of itself, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's like Flat Stanley. It's this opportunity that kind of sprang up into the cultural vernacular. Everybody's talking about it. It serves a purpose right now. But this movement to digital...
You're concerned about the fact that it's denigrating a very important subject.
No. What I'm saying is, it's just like, is there opportunity for video games in the future to become a primary source of campaigning? We're not going to go back to an old way of doing things. The campaign rallies of old are going to go away for quite a while. People are not going to feel comfortable getting into huge crowded spaces, elbow to elbow with people. And we got to look to digital communication platforms. And I'm wondering, is it better to go to the customer or the citizen where they are, as opposed to trying to make them come to your Zoom room? Because, you've got people like Joe Biden doing his Zoom town hall meetings and then you've got a younger generation that's going out to the consumers where they are and interacting in their environment. it seems to me that this says something about the way campaigning is done that's more door-to-door in a virtual way than the Zoom meeting is. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on that.
I think you're hitting on something really important, which is the virtualization of the political campaign and how that's going to play out. You know, we have the same thing going on in B2B marketing, which is the virtualization of events and all these Zoom webinars where we're trying to figure out how do we actually connect with people in this form anymore. So I don't know, though. I'll let others kind of speak to what they think, because I don't have any clue how it's going to play out.
Liz, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I mean, it's just like, I know political marketing is not your thing per se, but what do you think about this?
No.
I mean, it's just like, does it make more sense for political marketers to start thinking about platforms like Animal Crossing as an opportunity to go literally door to door and talk to people and interact with people and get their feedback?
You know, it's not surprising that it's a question that we're considering. Now, let's be clear. Not only am I not in the political marketing space, I have not been a gamer since Duck Hunt in '87. But I think what it comes down to is the truth is people are fried of Zoom. I think, you know, with everybody staying at home, you know, there is this desire for an evolution of community and connectivity in the context of COVID. And I believe Animal Crossing really creates a sense of community, a sense of joy, and it does that through, you know, adorable little animals. And it interjects creativity. And that is what this technological evolution has enabled in this gaming. And so, you know, I feel like, of course, you know, from a political campaigning perspective, if there is an audience there, then I would assume the campaigning would go there as well. So it's just so interesting because, you know, obviously the tonality is so different than how we come to consider politics in general. There's obviously more of a lighthearted nature to a game with animals. But if it's relevant to the audience and if there's an element of community there, politics are going to come there, and they're already there from what we're seeing.
Michael, any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, well, I think it was a very artful play from AOC, actually. I mean, and if you know, sort of read the report, she showed up for the graduation of a young guy called Kevin Popham, who just graduated from the Tulane School of Public Health as an epidemiologist. And, you know, I imagine her choice was quite deliberate. And there she was in her AOC T-shirt. You know, I think, you know, with her 6.8 million followers or whatever, I think this is a very smart move. But I think it may be one of those things where you have to talk about the base rate and the case rate. So right now, this is a great, you know, example case. It meets all of those elements that Liz and Tamara were talking about, you know, responding to being cooped up. That's where younger digital audiences are, et cetera, et cetera. Will it last? That's hard. That's much harder to call. But and the only fear I would have is sort of back to our earliest conversation, which is, you know, it would be sad if this place, you know, that Liz and Tamara both describe of sort of joy and whimsy, then gets polluted with these tribal arguments about politics, and it's a place then now where our differences and what divides us show up. So, you know, I think I'm not a gamer either, but it would be sad if this platform gets taken over. But in the near term, it's a very smart, artful, creative move, I would say.
Well, I am happily doing my Animal Crossing every day, so I am a gamer. If anybody wants to come to my town, send an invite. Anyway, I agree with you all. I think that where this stands right now is that we've got to start looking for new opportunities to interact with people. And if this is where they're at, this is where we have to go. Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do some shameless plugs. Starting with Michael Diamond, you can find him at nyu.edu. Tell us what's going on in your world. Michael, what would you like to promote?
Well, I'd love to promote, you know, the School of Professional Studies and the programs we have in integrated marketing and communications. It's a wonderful set of graduate programs and certificates. So if you need to sharpen the saw, this summer, sign up for some digital marketing or social media or reputation management or crisis communications. And certainly we'd love to see anybody in the fall for our 2 masters in PR and our master in integrated marketing. Fabulous faculty, including Bob Norp and colleagues like his, a phenomenal applied professional education, I think one of the best in the country. So,
did I forget to mention that Michael is my boss?
Full disclosure.
Now, next up, we have Tamara Gaffney. Tamara is at protegrity.com and also at quantentmarketing.com. I'll have the links in the show note. Tell us what's going on in your world, Tamara. What would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, I would like to promote I'm actually hiring some marketers. So join me on LinkedIn and, let's start a dialogue about some of the positions in product marketing and digital marketing demand that I'm actually hiring for. So that's good news, right? In this economy and everything. Also, Protegrity is just a really interesting place right now especially for me, because I had just recently done some research that said that lack of access to data was more important than centralizing data and making sure it all matched. And what we do at Protegrity is to help unleash data by making it more secure so that it can actually get out to all the departments where it needs to go. Today, too many people just think that the best way to secure data is to lock it up and not let anyone ever see it. It's kind of like, Fort Knox. No one ever gets to go in there. But we need access to this gold, and that's the form of data. So I'm really excited about this new opportunity at Protegrity.
It sounds great. I was surprised to see that you went somewhere else, but now I understand why you went there. It sounds like a great company.
It is great.
Now, last but not least, Liz Mayer. You can find her at jmsmucker.com. That's the home of Smuckers. You know them. They're the jelly place. They also make all kinds of cool stuff like coffee and peanut butter. Tell us what's going on in your world, Liz. What would you like to promote?
Well, I would say with everything being the way that it is with the economy and with so much of the stay-at-home, circumstances, I've actually personally had a little bit more free time on my hands, and I've been really focusing my efforts around, creating more personal development content for women in the workforce, to help them really manage the demands of, being at home, oftentimes with kids, and balancing a career and just their personal goals. So I've started, creating a little bit more content in that regards under an Instagram handle at Work and Whim Co. and also on my website at workandwhim.com. So really good content that I think right now a lot of people need to hear just to be uplifted and to ultimately manage their jobs, but also their joy.
That's fantastic. I had no idea you were doing that, so I'll have to check that out. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me about getting your brand's podcast off the ground. And you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair. This fair was really difficult for me to do, Liz, because it's just like, I'm looking at this and it's such an ugly thing that they're addressing, but the way they did it was probably one of the better ways that I've seen any brand deal with the uproar over the police killing of George Floyd and the larger question about Black Lives Matter and violence against unarmed black men and women as a result of police brutality. They went and they said Nike did this kind of play on their just do it and said, for once, don't do it. And I thought that was a real clever way to take on the situation that they were facing. I'll leave this up to anybody. I know this is an uncomfortable subject. So anybody want to comment on this one?
I mean, I would just say that Nike took such a sensitive, horrid situation. And the fact that they continue to address it in a way that is true to the DNA of their brand. They continue to stand for something and really use it to address deeper societal issues by standing against hatred, it's just such an authentic move. And it's ultimately, starting to be not just a brand code, but a rally cry for community, which is what, quite frankly, we need right now.
I agree wholeheartedly. This one was it was kind of an eye-opener, the way they did this. It makes some of the bad moves kind of go into the background, and I'm really glad to see that Nike not only took a stand, but did it with such grace and humility. Now next on the fail for the week, now this one's just mind-boggling to me. LG Poland, formerly LG Polska in terms of the Instagram handle or the TikTok handle where they were originally posting this, made basically a video of a guy trying to do an upskirt video of a girl walking upstairs, and then he shows that he was just trying to do a selfie, so that makes it okay, only he really was trying to do upskirt videos, and he's just a dirty old man at the end of this TikTok video. I don't even know where to begin, Michael. I'm like looking at this and going, how can you think as a marketer that this is acceptable in 2020? I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm with you. I think completely tone deaf and creepy, and it's an idea that should have died a long time before it ever saw the light of day. Yep, bizarre.
I read it and my heart sunk, because leading a marketing team, a global marketing team, you don't always really know what some of the folks in other regions or other places that are not as close to home base are doing sometimes. And I just thought to myself, oh, this poor head of marketing who's trying to deal with this now, because, there was somebody who made a bad decision and it went out on TikTok. And that type of thing can happen to all of us, just because not everyone has the same sense that, we do about what's okay socially. So it just made my heart, kind of go out to the people who were leading that marketing team, knowing that they really didn't intend to do something like that.
But the young people understand these networks. We'll give it to them. It's good to have some kind of sense.
There's that.
Should we have good to have some sense in the mix there. And then the foul of the week. Target was actually one of the brands being brave about programmatic during the crisis. They were advertising against COVID news. They were doing everything that we've been recommending on this program for some time. And now they're suddenly confronted with ads showing up on articles about their own stores being looted in Minneapolis as a result of this current unrest that's going on. Tamara, I don't even know where to go with this. Target is not at fault. I'm not saying they're getting a foul for this. I'm just saying the situation is foul. There's no way to win for them at this point, given the circumstances.
Yeah, and I remember I used to be a media buyer for a major international airline, and that airline got shot down over Russia one day while I was buying media for it. And there was an instant, off switch of all the advertising right at that moment. And I think that what we're seeing is on the one side, the advertising industry doesn't know how to turn the things off for clients on their programmatic side. And then on the other side, the clients themselves don't know how to turn off their programmatic in all the different places that it's activated. When I was dealing with this particular situation where we did not want to be advertising, we only had television ads running and newspaper, and it was easy for me to turn it off. I just think what we're dealing with here, I mean, brand safety is really important, but we're also dealing with just the chaos that is digital ad buying. It's not that easy to figure out how to stop something like that from happening. So it's kind of unfortunate in all the different ways.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.